A young man named Zhao Bai, in search of immortality, accidentally joined a sect full of charlatans. Meanwhile, his older brothers took turns showing off, pretending to create powerful techniques. But they could not have imagined that they would meet a strange genius who was capable of understanding even fake techniques. The entire sect froze in shock, unable to comprehend who this junior disciple was. Zhao Bai ended up in another world, just like those web novel authors who love to steal plots. After 9 years of relentless work, he finally completed his training. But then he accidentally learned that this world he was in was actually about cultivation. The system decided that the parameters of the world must have been entered incorrectly, but that was no big deal. Zhao Bai fell to his knees in helplessness and believed in himself. After all, she had no idea what he had gone through during those 9 years. Xiao decided that he no longer wanted to study. Who would want to study when they could achieve immortality? After that, when he attended a meeting to test his spiritual abilities, Xiao was excited. He wanted to get back to Earth. And this rebirth was absolutely nothing like in those damn novels. And in fact, he was absolutely sure that he was the chosen one. But suddenly a man approached him and decided to find out if he was ready to achieve immortality. After visiting the Qingyuan Dao sect, the head of the Taoist sect, Tai Hua, approached Chang Yu and said he had a task for him. Calling the young man a good disciple, he told him that he had to help his teacher. This was a big event for them. Su Chang's older brother did not understand what other big event could happen in such a small and insignificant sect as theirs. The head of Taiwan explained that the higher authorities had recently issued a new decree prohibiting lowly sects like theirs, and if they did not recruit 8 permanent disciples within a year and upgrade to a third-class sect, they would be shut down. Su thought about it and replied that they only needed to find 1 more person. The head explained that it wasn't that simple. Yesterday, he had gone to a meeting to test spiritual abilities. All the sects there were desperately trying to lure away students, and the prices were insane. They even shamelessly used seduction tricks. Girls pounced on guys and asked to cultivate together. But in the end, he still managed to find one. Although he is a complete novice and has no spiritual abilities, fortunately, he was a good person, and more importantly, he was not willing to accept any salary. This guy's name is Yi Ping, and he said that money is nothing to him. If the teacher can teach him how to cultivate immortality, he is ready for anything. And the teacher should not think about what the sect can give him, but most importantly, what he himself can give to the sect. The leader decided to ask the elder Chang Yu where he could find another such good student. But he was worried that as soon as Ping realized how weak their sect was, and that there was nothing to learn there, he would most likely run away. However, his master came up with a brilliant plan. Simply put, show your superiority. Let Chang take his disciples and have them take turns composing incomprehensible fighting techniques in their fields and teaching him. And they need to stall for time. And in a year, when the sect is established, let Ping decide for himself whether to stay or leave. Chang didn't understand why the head took it so seriously. It was just a pretense. And does the master know what nickname his comrades gave him behind his back? The head was surprised and did not know what it was. Chang called his nickname Useless Disciple. But he was so angry that the strength left his body. But in reality, when it came to bragging, he dared to say that he was second to none in the whole of Qingzhou, and no one else dared to claim that they were first, and the master addressed him correctly. After all, that was his specialty. But the head did not understand if that was a reason to be proud, but he decided that, in any case, if Chang could hold him for at least a year without failure. But Chang interrupted him and gestured that he would hold him for 5 years. The head was initially surprised, but Chan explained that if he took it on, then holding out for just 1 year was too small a goal. He could handle such a naive failure with just one easy move. At least from now on, let him admire only the green clouds, not the immortal ones. And in his next life, he will become a man of the green clouds. The chief was delighted and said that it was not bad. The king of greenheads lived up to his name, but Chang decided that if he didn't complete the task, he would eat that sword raw. He would swallow it with sauce. And if the master has nothing else, then the apprentice will leave, and tonight he will wait for him on the back mountain. The head decided to be hospitable and wanted to guide the apprentice with his sword, But Chang replied that it was not worth doing. Even in 3 short days you can see a person in a new light. Today he is no longer the little apprentice who needed the master's guidance. And when he saw how the student Chang raised his hand and made his gesture, the chief was surprised and understood what it meant. Chang explained that this was the blossoming that the master had desired. Seeing this, the head did not understand what kind of sword technique it was, and he did not understand how such a thing was possible. He was clearly a mediocre swordsman who in 10 years had not mastered a single complete set of techniques. But the head was confident and said that the student would not do this. Chang laughed and said he couldn't help himself. He decided to show off a little. The head said he considered it a masterpiece and hoped the new student wouldn't go crazy because of it. At night, at the top of the back mountain, Chang waited for the new student to arrive. But he was very cold. This was the place he had specifically chosen to create the right atmosphere. But suddenly he heard the footsteps of the new student. He immediately decided to prepare himself and show his strength. Meanwhile, Ping climbed the mountain with great difficulty. He believed that immortals were truly not ordinary people, but when he raised his head and saw his master, he was shocked by his power and how majestically he stood. Chang immediately decided to demonstrate his abilities and released his cultivation. The energy came out of his body and went to the sword, which immediately came out of his belt. Seeing this, Ping realized that it was the sword of immortality. But after thinking about it, he decided that something was wrong here. After all, a sect that was willing to accept such worthless trash as him, without spiritual power, must be very bad. But he did not understand why it had such an unusual disciple. But then he thought again and came to a decision. At first glance, this sect looks like some third-rate, unregistered sect. But in reality, it is some kind of top-secret sect of the hidden world, where everyone inside is a powerful fighter. Any one of them could easily send him to heaven. And this phenomenon is similar to today, when he first followed the master into the sect. And it is an overwhelming feeling of desolation. At the time, he didn't think much of it, but now, looking back, it was too much. But be that as it may, it is still a cultivation sect. But he doesn't know how it could be in such a dilapidated state. And yet, despite the devastation, every corner was impeccably clean. And that's very suspicious. Everything here is suspicious. They deliberately keep themselves in the shadows to hide from the world. And then everything falls into place. Ping shared his emotions, saying that even among the 3 million immortal swordsmen in heaven, they would be forced to bow their heads before him. Chan immediately liked this boy's style, and from now on, he would be his disciple. In fact, he did not expect that, just by going out to meet him, he would receive such a perfectly pompous poem as a gift. And Chan decided that since his new younger brother praised him so highly, it would be rude not to respond in kind. Although he had a little something in store, he would give him a chance and good luck, and he showed all his power of cultivation and energy. Chang introduced himself as the elder brother of the Qingyun sect. And this breeze was actually a secret art of bestowing luck that could greatly enhance his talent for cultivation. Ping was surprised that a mere breeze could greatly increase one's cultivation talent. And how could such an ordinary sect do that? Ping thanked the teacher for his great kindness. He had nothing with which to repay him. Chang replied that it was no big deal. In fact, he believed that it was just a light breeze that couldn't be any purer. Before teaching his younger brother the art of the sword, Chang wanted to ask a question. Ping suddenly remembered reading this in books. Before the incomparable master reveals the secret, he always asks a question. And Chang decided to ask him what he thought was the highest art of swordsmanship. He understood that only he, the true king of pomposity, could ask such a pretentious question. And whatever he said would be wrong. And so he could show how deep his understanding of the sword was. And no one does it better than himself. Pin understood that even the wording of this question was perfect. The hidden master was almost a fact, but the question seemed simple to him, yet it concealed a boundless essence. An ordinary person would say something like killing an enemy in 10 steps, walking 1,000 miles without leaving a trace. But it's definitely not that superficial. In any case, you have to be careful with your answer. In fact, Chang just asked him that question, so there's no need to take it so seriously. An hour later, Chang was tired of waiting for an answer to his question. He thought he would die of cold on this mountain, so Chan asked him to give an answer. Ping replied that the younger man believed that the highest art of the sword was a single blade of grass capable of cutting down the sun, moon, and stars. Chang was greatly surprised by the answer that a blade of grass could cut down the sun, moon, and stars. Even though he himself had been practicing swordsmanship for 20 years, even the strongest people he had seen could only cut down a mountain with one blow. And a blade of grass that could cut down the sun, moon, and stars was already at the level of super pretense. Ping was afraid that his answer was too exaggerated. He hoped that Chan wasn't offended. Chang noticed that this guy was very good, spoke accurately, and felt like a kindred spirit. But Chang decided that this was too exaggerated. In cultivation, stability is the most important thing, and the younger brother had aimed too high. Upon hearing these words, Ping acknowledged his mistake, but Chang decided to show him his mastery of the Sword of Immortality. After finishing his technique, he said that he would leave him a sword mark, and this sword mark is ordinary if you can call it that. But if you call it unusual, it contains the strongest sword intent in the world. How much his student would comprehend it depended on his perception. He would test his abilities in 7 days. Pin understood that this was definitely the strongest sword intent of a hidden world master. And he was lucky. He had actually stumbled upon a sect of powerful hidden masters. Descending from the mountain, the girl turned to her older brother and decided to ask him what talent their new younger brother had. Chang immediately thought that his little sister was spying again. The girl smiled and said that she was just curious, but Chang asked her to postpone the conversation for now. The older brother wanted to ask her if she knew how powerful the highest sword technique was. His little sister was shocked and didn't understand what fencing had to do with anything. But Chang decided to tell her that the highest skill of the sword was to use a single blade of grass to cut down the sun, moon, and stars. The younger sister was shocked and praised her older brother for his acting skills because they had improved again. Hearing these pleasant words, the older brother was delighted and realized that he was cool. But his sister asked him to answer her question. She asked how long it would take for their younger brother to comprehend the intent of the sword. Chang didn't really know how he would be able to comprehend it. After all, he himself had not yet comprehended it. His sister explained that she meant the usual intent of the sword, but Chang confidently replied that he did not know. Sister was surprised and thought her brother was mocking her. 2 hours later, behind the mountain near Ping Cliff, he stood in front of his older brother's sword cut and thought. To him it looked like an ordinary crack. He did not understand where the strongest intent of the sword lay. He grabbed his head and thought it was all nonsense. After all, everything that had happened before had already proven that his older brother was definitely a master. And it turned out that the whole thing was just that he hadn't trained hard enough. He looked at the cut with his own eyes and continued to look at it for several hours. But soon a figure appeared in Pin's mind. This figure held a long sword and began to demonstrate fencing techniques. He demonstrated his sword techniques, and the blade of the sword glowed like that of an immortal. The sound was as if a huge bronze bell had rung in his ears. 4 sword styles, 12 techniques, everything became clearer and clearer. Then, as if he himself were drawing his sword and practicing, and not just once, but again and again. 3 times he demonstrated his mastery of the immortal sword. Pin did not notice how he himself began to make movements. It flowed into his mind and power, which was fiercer than a stream of divine inspiration. Seeing a bright light behind him, he didn't understand what was happening. He thought it was his older brother. But he would never have thought that a simple breeze could raise his talent to such terrifying heights. But this was not just an unrivaled master. After such a series of failures, he had finally hit the jackpot. Pin tried to calm down. He felt that this sword mark would surely allow him to master even more sword techniques. 7 days later, at the residence of his older brothers, Chang gathered his chest for pretense. Opening his chest, he rejoiced and thought that today was a very good day, perfect for pretending. Heading up the mountain, he suddenly felt tired. If he had known, he would have chosen a different place for his pretense. And suddenly he wondered why everyone thought that practicing fencing was so easy. But he thinks it's very sad. 7 days ago, his younger sister realized that her brother did not understand the essence of the sword. She considered him hopeless because he had been learning fencing for 10 years and still did not know the essence of the sword. But Chang got angry and asked her not to talk nonsense. She doesn't understand anything. Fencing is not an easy thing. The Four Thunders sword technique that his older brother is mastering is not a simple technique. He is one of the top 10 in Qinzhou. Back then, the Taoist of the Four Seasons became famous throughout Qinzhou with this sword technique. It is the art of the sword of extreme rigidity and yang, divided into 4 complete sets for spring, summer, autumn, and winter. And if someone masters all 4 sets, they will be able to summon the thunder of the 4 seasons. And each set is further divided into 4 minor levels: beginning, skill, mastery, and perfection. It all sounded impressive to the younger sister. She decided to find out what level her older brother was at. The older brother replied that the Sword of Spring Thunder had reached the skill level. A total of 18 sword techniques. The younger sister was surprised that her brother only knew Spring Thunder. But Chang didn't understand what only Spring Thunder meant. After all, there are only 4 basic levels. His progress is definitely considered elite in Qinzhou. And her older brother had reached the skill level in just 10 years. In less than 10 years, he would reach mastery. And in 100 years, perfection. And then, she would see how strong he really was. But the younger sister became curious. If her younger brother comprehended the essence of the sword on his own, what kind of talent would that be on the path of the sword? Chang said that technique is secondary on the path of the sword. The main thing is the will of the sword. And the stronger the sword will, the more miraculous any sword technique becomes. Even a simple stake inspires fear. But the 3 great barriers of sword will are as difficult to overcome as climbing to the sky. The first of these is infinite sword will, and in all 10 states, only one master has barely touched this level. He is known as the Sword Lord Taisho, revered in all 10 states. But Junior simply says, if he really achieved this, what level would he be at then? Chang believed that this was absolutely impossible, and asked her to forget about her younger brother. Even the greatest prodigy of Qinzhou in 500 years could not comprehend infinite sword will. Finally, Chang climbed the mountain and wondered if his younger brother had woken up. Looking closely, he saw a picture of his younger brother standing in front of the mark on his blade. He didn't know what nonsense this was. The huge dark circles under his eyes showed that he hadn't slept yet. He didn't want to believe that this fool had seriously invested in this sword mark. And this invention was bad, and now he looked like a villain. He felt sorry for him, and understood that for the sake of the sect he would have to endure it. Then he would make amends somehow. Pin raised his head and saw that his older brother had arrived. Chang asked how the training was going. Pin said that he had figured it out himself, and it was all thanks to the opportunity his older brother had given him. But Chang asked him not to be upset. It was perfectly normal not to be able to grasp it. But then, he suddenly stopped and was shocked, and asked his younger brother again what he had said. Ping replied to his older brother that it was true. Counting this morning, he had mastered a total of 400 sword techniques. Chang thought it was impossible. He was just teasing his brother because he had never trained with a sword, and he had hastily scribbled that sword mark. He knew perfectly well what it was, and he thought that his younger brother had made him look ridiculous. But Ping didn't understand why his older brother was mocking him. And was he really laughing because his younger brother had learned so little? 400 a day is not a small amount. But then he changed his mind, thinking that a master like his older brother surely knew tens of thousands of sword techniques. His older brother had spoon-fed him knowledge and given him an excellent opportunity. With a little talent, learning 1,000 techniques a day was a piece of cake, and Chang decided that there was no need to lie. This sword technique was profound, and it was perfectly normal not to be able to master it. He would not look down on him because of this. But Ping said again that he wasn't lying. He had really mastered 400 techniques. Ping thought that his older brother believed he wasn't even worthy of 400 techniques. But Ping believed that even if his talent was weak, it was he who had given him this opportunity. 400 wasn't that many. He could do it. Chang actually thought differently. And here was another student who underestimated the way of the sword. But at that moment, Su Chang was indeed a little angry. He may not have been a master of the highest level, but the pain that many ordinary people go through in order to grow is no less. And yet they are often ridiculed, consciously or not, for their slow progress. And that hurts anyone. And Chang decided to agree with him and look at the techniques he had learned. He believes that the time has come to teach the younger man a lesson. He will help him grow. Ping did not dare to refuse and agreed, and Chan saw that the younger one even dared to agree, and that stubborn tongue of his will be his undoing. Ping took his sword in his hands, and immediately the iron was covered with light magic. Then he began to demonstrate all the techniques he had learned in one day. But the sword techniques that Ping showed were lightning fast and smooth, like flowing water. In an instant, he had already performed 36 movements. Chang watched all this with amazement and couldn't believe it. At that moment, an unexpected clap of thunder rumbled in the sky above them. Su Chang froze in complete amazement. Before his eyes, countless threads of lightning merged into a thunder dragon. It was a scene he knew all too well, one he had seen countless times in his dreams. He heard the dragon roar. Paralyzed, Su Chang was so shocked that he could barely breathe. He couldn't be mistaken. He had heard the dragon's roar, and this was the great perfection of the sword of 4 thunderbolts. For years he had dreamed of achieving great perfection in the technique of the spring thunder sword, and to hear that legendary dragon's roar, and then he could die in peace. And now this young man had achieved all this in just 7 days. Chang shouted in surprise that it was impossible, but that was only the beginning. After just 5 breaths, a completely new dragon's roar sounded. This thunder dragon, woven entirely of green lightning, symbolized the great perfection of the summer thunder sword. And before it disappeared, almost simultaneously, the autumn thunder dragon appeared. The 2 roars of the dragons, rivaling each other in brilliance, the summer and autumn swords achieved great perfection together. It was unheard of, unbelievable. At that moment, Pina's sword did not stop but moved even faster. Faster and faster, until it became a real phantom. And the most powerful strike of the 4 thunder sword technique, the winter thunder sword, also finally reached great perfection. But this great perfection was different from the previous 3. For Chan, it was as if a harsh, deep winter had arrived. And only on the 432nd movement did Ping finally stop. Thus, the 7-day demonstration of his skill came to an end. By this point, Ping had brought the 4 swords of thunder, spring, summer, autumn, and winter, to great perfection. However, Ping did not move. Ping suspected that something was wrong here, and it seemed to him that he was relying too much on the sword itself. The formless path gives rise to all tangible things. Non-existence is existence, and one must look beyond the object, think beyond oneself. He gathered his strength and asked his older brother if he wanted to tell him something. But Pin was surprised and decided to try the sword of a commoner, cutting the neck from above and piercing the liver from below. It was no better than cockfighting. But the sword of the Son of Heaven is forged from the 5 elements. Yin and Yang open up, and it takes everything under heaven into its blade. Chang was shocked and thought that the younger brother was experiencing another epiphany, simply demonstrating a sword technique. And if the sword of winter, thunder, shown just now, was the highest embodiment of destruction and death, then, now the aura emanating from it was the complete opposite. And it studied rebirth and new life. But in a single moment, it seemed as if millennia had passed, and the energy, overflowing with vitality, flowed endlessly. Su Chang looked at the invisible sword in front of him, and felt that at that moment, it was the whole world, and it seemed that with one careless swing, he could crush tens of thousands of warriors. Chang looked closely, and was shocked to see the sword's intent. But it dissipated in an instant. Ping saw that his feeling had disappeared, and he no longer felt anything. But it lasted only a moment, and as he expected, his talent was still too weak. Chang saw and said aloud that the talent was too weak. As a child, he was fortunate enough to see the sword master Taizu once, and it was then that he firmly chose the path of the sword. At that time, the sword master did not even use spiritual power, but his sword movements, his pressure, and his vision were almost the same as what his younger brother had just shown. This was undoubtedly the infinite intent of the sword. This cannot be called only the first genius of the Jin country. It can be called the first genius even among all 10 countries. With such an understanding of the art of the sword, even without spiritual power, in the future, with the help of magical artifacts, talismans, and other unusual means, he would still be able to reach the pinnacle of the sword path. Ping told his older brother that he knew the sword movements he had mastered were quite ordinary, but he would work twice as hard. Chang understood that this was not much. In this life, he was afraid that he would not even be able to reach his little finger. Such an unsurpassed genius must not be allowed to leave under any circumstances, and he had to keep him, and his mask had to remain flawless. He turned around and saw that it was quite ordinary, and there was nothing special about it. He understood that if it was normal, then he was a complete nobody. But suddenly, Chang saw something on the stone and asked what it was. Ping said it was just a notebook with his observations during training, nothing worth paying attention to. Chang was surprised and became curious to see what was inside. But the younger brother replied that he was very ashamed. Opening the book, he saw that the first 50 movements of spring thunder were written there, and his older brother wanted to teach him the principle of white sand, which turns black when it gets into the mud. And the first 100 movements of spring thunder, the older brother wanted to teach him the principle. Everything in the world balances each other. Without the bottom, there is no top. And the first 50 movements of summer thunder, the greatest straightness seems crooked. Reading the lines in the notebook, Su Chang felt as if he were looking at the starry sky for the first time, and he knew every word, but when put together they were as vast and deep as the galaxy itself. And although he could not understand them, he was deeply shaken. Chang was surprised and did not believe that he had said these principles. Ping replied that it was not as his brother had read it. It was only his arrogant interpretation of the most superficial side. It was certainly not even a tenth of the depth that his older brother actually wanted to convey. But in his mind, he didn't understand a single word. And how did the younger brother comprehend it at all? To comprehend the Tao from emptiness, and now he considers him a monster. He himself had trained diligently for more than 10 years, and had only slightly touched upon the initial understanding of spring thunder. And this green novice, in just 7 days, brought the technique of the 4 thunders to a great conclusion. And it's just impossible to believe he touched the most infinite intention of the sword. Chang turned around and told him to continue his comprehension. He would come back to him in a couple of days. Pin saw that something was clearly wrong with his older brother's expression. Did he think his younger brother's talent was too pitiful and was going to kick him out? And now he didn't want that at all, because he had finally found someone who agreed to accept him. Half a year had passed, and he had attended more than 50 gatherings on the path to immortality, both large and small, and none of them agreed to accept him. Could he just sit alone, looking at the starry sky, and comprehend the Tao from emptiness? It was simply impossible. But no matter what happened, he had to seize this chance and not let it slip away again, especially since this sect was made up of unsurpassed masters. At that time, in the residences of the sect's master, the head was enjoying the weather and considered it good. He was very pleased to drink tea and enjoy the flowers. But then Chang came running and shouted that they had a problem. The head was surprised and decided to find out what had happened and why he was so alarmed. This was not like him. Chang immediately explained that the master's dream could come true. Their sect would finally summon a dragon. The leader was surprised and did not understand what the disciple meant by summoning a dragon. Chang replied that the new younger brother had started with literally nothing, and in 7 short days he had mastered all 4 thunder sword techniques. But the head did not believe him, and jumping on his disciple, said that this was not something to joke about. The student said that the recent celestial phenomenon was a sign that the 4 seasonal swords had reached great perfection. And perhaps the master did not see this in him. The head thought that some master nearby was breaking through, but it turned out to be little Ping. The head was so happy that he cried, glad that their Qinyun Dao sect had finally produced a genius. The head even lost consciousness from happiness. But Chang asked him to calm down and not give in to excessive joy. The leader poured a mug of water over his head and tried to calm down. After all, he had almost gotten himself into trouble, and the fortune teller had said that trouble awaited him when he turned 100. But Chang did not know that if the younger brother continued to remain in their sect, would they not restrain him? The master explained to him that he was worrying too much. Ping had already attended 50 ascension gatherings, and no sect had accepted him. Only they had chosen him. This was a blessing for him and for the sect. Couldn't he see that there was no problem? Besides, cultivation is destiny. Others did not choose him, only they did, and that is destiny. The disciple thought that if Ping had gone to a great sect, would everything have gone smoothly for him? Not to mention the envy of the main disciples, even intrigues between great sects, secret killings of talents to hinder the growth of others, happen often. And Chan didn't need to be so soft-hearted, and the master was not a greedy man. As soon as the sect reached the second level, he would tell him the truth, and justice will prevail. But whether he stays or leaves is up to him. Chan thought about it and made it clear that he would follow the master's decision. The next day, the head felt calm in the afternoon, but it did not last long, and someone began to approach him and say that they had bad news. Chan said that something had happened, but the master decided to go into hiding, and the sect now remains in the hands of the disciple. The disciple explained to the master that it was not debt collectors, but something else. The master immediately stopped and became curious about what this something else could be, and he began to beat the disciple for panicking so much. After all, he had frightened him very much. The master told him to say what the big problem was. Were they destroying something? But Chang said he'd better see it for himself. The master looked and saw that it was a letter from the Qingzhou sect's administrative office. And today, in order to prevent people from being deceived by fake sects, all failed sects in the territory would be inspected. Within 2 months, 10 low-grade spirit stones must be submitted to confirm the legitimacy of the sect. The master was angry and disagreed with the letter, saying that there were no more laws, and to forcibly take spiritual stones and oppress the weak, he would go to the capital and complain to the emperor. In the world of cultivation, 1 copper coin is worth 1 bun. 10,000 copper coins are equal to 100 taels of silver, which is equal to 1 tael of gold. And 10 taels of gold is only 1 spirit stone. The master understood that his Qinyun sect had not eaten or drunk for a whole year, and they would hardly be able to collect 10 spirit stones. Chang asked the master not to panic, and he decided to find out how many spiritual stones the sect had. The master blushed and decided to show the number of stones on his fingers. When Chang saw the number he showed, he immediately realized that 70 spiritual stones would be enough. But the master replied that it was impossible. Chan believed that 70 taels of gold would be difficult, but they could collect it. But seeing the master's face, he thought that it was only 70 taels of silver. The master turned his head in shame and said in a low voice that it was 70 copper coins. Chan heard this and did not understand how it was possible. Even if they were poor, they were still a sect. The master explained that their sect had some savings. He thought that silver was just gathering dust and wasting away, and learned about something new, a cultivation fund. Somehow they said that if you invest money, you will get income every month, and quite a lot of it. He barely managed to get an investment slot. But who would have thought that while he was looking at the interest rates, they wanted his principal amount? In just a few days, they took all the money. The master confessed and believed that Master Chan had been deceived. Chan immediately understood that 70 copper coins and 100 taels of gold would simply be the end of them. And now Chan was sure that the Qinyun Dao sect was truly doomed this time. But the master said that no matter what, he would take responsibility. If there was no other way out, they would have to risk everything and go to the mountains of the quiet forest, if necessary. They finally had a genius. They couldn't let the sect collapse. Suddenly, everything around them sparkled and lightning came from the mountain. The master looked on with surprise and did not understand where it came from. Chang immediately said that it was from his younger brother's residence. Chang couldn't believe that his younger brother had made another breakthrough. But the master thought it was impossible. Even geniuses don't cultivate in this way. But the master suddenly decided that he needed to go down the mountain and see if he could get some spirit stones. After all, now that the dragon had appeared, no matter what it took, he would not allow the sect to be disbanded. The sect was in his hands. And most importantly, he needed to take care of his younger brother, teach him properly, and no longer lead him astray. After 7 days, Pin trained and had no intention of going down to the people. Pin demonstrated the highest level of sword mastery, and everything was perfect. Chang watched and was surprised that he had mastered so many techniques in 7 days. At this rate, he would reach the peak in an instant, but he couldn't watch. The pressure was too great. Pin saw his older brother and immediately stopped to greet him, but Chang told him not to bow. and let him tell him how his training went. Pin said that he had learned all 1,460 techniques. It was difficult, of course, but he did it. Chang was shocked that his younger brother had learned them all, and now he didn't know what to do. But then he suddenly remembered something and told him to listen carefully. Even if his sword techniques had reached perfection, it was only the beginning. After that came the power of the sword, and then the intention of the sword. There are countless sword techniques, but one strike filled with the power of the sword is equal to the power of a whole set of techniques combined. And only by mastering the power of the sword can he be considered a true master of the sword. The elder decided that he needed to show off more. Otherwise, with this guy's talent, his pretense would be exposed in 3 days. But suddenly, Pin became curious about what level his older brother had reached. Chang looked up at the sky and replied that Pin was a modest student who had only recently entered the legendary first level of the great path of the sword, the infinite intent of the sword. And in his heart, he was very pleased to boast. But Pin was shocked by what he heard about the sword's intent and the infinite intent of the sword. And as he expected from his older brother, he was a true hidden master. Chang said that by mastering the power of the sword, he entered the highest realm. It has 3 levels, and the first of them is the infinite intent of the sword. And don't be fooled by the fact that it's only the first level. If he reaches it, he will already be number 1 among the 10 nations. Pin thought about it and decided that his older brother was already at least number 1 among the 10 nations. He knew that masters were great, but he didn't think they were that great. And if he studied under him, wouldn't that make him the second most powerful in all 10 nations? He had become a dragon, and he never thought that he, Ping, would see this day. Pin told his older brother that he would definitely try hard and catch up with him. In this life, he would also achieve the infinite intent of the sword, and when he became great, he would never forget his kindness. After hearing these words, Chang began to feel even worse, but for the younger brother, it was all like a dream. Just a few days ago, he was an ordinary person clinging to life. And now, he was in a sect, learning sword techniques. Ping said that the sunset glowed on the top of Qingyun, and the slopes of Hengyue burned with a scarlet light, and he strives to comprehend the arts of Qingzhou cultivation, taking the morning breeze as his food. But Chang said that he heard from the sect master that before he went up into the mountains, he was a scholar. But Ping thought he was only half a scholar. He never received an official title. He just loved to read and paint. And suddenly, the elder asked him for help with a painting. He understood that when little Ping took flight in the future, wouldn't that be the best reason to brag? And the strongest swordsman cultivator of the Jing nation once painted a picture for them. In his past life, Ping joined an art club to woo his goddess. He trained diligently for 3 years and finally learned to paint. But soon, the goddess ran away with a rich guy from the Golden Youth, and painting couldn't save the lonely bachelor. An hour later, Ping was already holding paper in his hands to start painting, and the senior was watching him. He saw that when he was serious, he looked quite handsome, almost like his older brother. Suddenly, Ping informed the elder that he was finished, but Chang decided to evaluate the painting first, and there was no need to worry. When he opened the painting, he was shocked by what he saw and couldn't believe his eyes. The painting was so beautifully done that everything looked realistic. He thought that the evening glow enveloped the sky in the painting. The Qingyun mountain range looked like an earthly paradise, and the flowers, grass, and trees seemed alive. The realism was even more striking in the details. But what attracted his gaze most was the image in the painting. The silhouette alone was enough to capture the fierce and majestic presence of the immortal swordmaster, and he had the feeling that he was ready to break out of the canvas and strike right at the heart of the viewer. Chan liked the painting very much and considered it magnificent. If there was a flaw, it was only that it did not fully convey his beauty. Pin replied that he had always wanted to express his gratitude for his mentorship, and this was just a small token of appreciation. Chan was shocked and showed it in his eyes. In the corner, he saw that he had called him a hermit. He suddenly heard the master say that he was his mentor and would come up with a way to save their sect. But unexpectedly, he began to hear the master's voice, asking him to come quickly to help. He immediately realized that it was the master's voice being transmitted, and it would take so much money, and he didn't know what the solution was yet. Meanwhile, In the Taiyue sword sect, one of the three great sects of Qingzhou, a huge dragon appeared, and all this was happening on the cliff of sword comprehension. People gathered at the bottom of the cliff and watched everything that was happening. The guy who was there had been waiting for this from his ancestor for 4 seasons. Just one sword mark, and it looks terrifying. But the girl asked him not to talk nonsense. Otherwise, why would they all be sitting here? Are ordinary swordsmen worthy of them, the geniuses, comprehending their sword marks? After these words, there was a lightning strike behind the spectators, and everyone was in shock. The guy who was on the cliff came down with the help of lightning and shouted with joy that he had finally understood it. And this is the great conclusion. The spectator realized that Su Heng's older brother had indeed mastered it, and this was the grand finale of the Spring Thunder Sword. But the girl thought that the Taoist of the 4 seasons once said that even for a genius it would take at least 3 years to achieve the great conclusion. Brother Heng did it in just 1, and he is truly one of the 10 best swordsmen in Qingzhou. With such talent, they can only admire him. The teachers told Mingjian's older brother that having such a genius among his students really shows his keen eye, and he congratulates him. And perhaps at this Qingzhou Xingdao Shouheng conference, he will even take first place. But Mingjian laughed and thought it was just a grand finale, nothing special. But they asked the elder brother not to be modest. But the second teacher said that Qingzhou was full of hidden dragons and lurking tigers, so it was a little premature to declare first place. Mingjian thought that Elder Chen was right. But how could Henger deserve it? His few disciples had only reached the initial level in a year. They must have been deliberately holding back out of self-confidence, allowing Henger to go first, so they hadn't broken through yet. But the elder became angry and decided to ask him how he dared to speak in such a mocking tone. The junior saw this and asked his senior brothers not to quarrel, since they were all on the same side. And first place may be an exaggeration, but this time the sect master ordered that, regardless of anything else, they must take a place in the top 10, and the 2 of them had just come out of seclusion, so they didn't know. This time, those who made it into the top 10 would receive a token to enter the Taishuan Sword Tower. And he didn't need to explain what it meant to step into the Taishuan Sword Tower and pass its trials. Mingjian smiled and replied that heaven itself was helping him. This time, he and his master would definitely take a place in the top 1. And the sect master could rest assured. But Elder Chen asked him not to speak so soon, because if a disciple from a small sect really took his place, the shame would be unbearable. Mingjian began to laugh and said that if any disciple outside the 3 great sects could defeat Heng, he would clean his brother's toilet for a whole year. Meanwhile, at the residence of the Qingyun sect master, the head gathered all his savings and placed them on the table. Chang looked at the table and decided to find out if this was the solution to their financial problems. Chang looked and saw a pile of junk. He decided to find out if this was the way to solve everything. And how could they make money from it? The master replied that it could be pawned. As their mentor, he had truly exhausted all ideas, and they could do whatever they wanted. Even a dead horse is treated as if it were alive. Chan decided to leave so as not to embarrass himself in front of the master. But the master grabbed him and called him an exemplary student, asking him for help one last time. But suddenly, he saw the scroll in his student's hands and asked about it. Chang replied that it was a drawing given to him by his younger brother. The master snatched the scroll from his hands and ran away, shouting that they were ruined, and he was thinking only about creativity. He decided to take it and pawn it too. Every coin was important, but Chang said it was useless. He asked the old man to give him back the painting. In their city, there was a pawn shop called Lai Zai. The owner greeted everyone with a cheerful face and asked all visitors to come in. Seeing the guest in front of him, he asked if they were there to buy or sell. The chief replied that he was selling, and everything was of the highest quality. The owner immediately realized that these were not ordinary guests. He asked them to take a look at such splendor. He felt that he was looking at some very rare artifacts. Opening the bag, he saw that it contained only junk. The owner blushed and shouted that it was all junk and even erotic books. Hearing this, the head immediately remembered that it was a limited edition photo album of the courtesan Lan, and he reached out to take it back. He definitely wasn't selling it. He would sell all the others, but he would not sell this one. even if they went bankrupt. Hearing this, Chang asked his mentor to lend him the album too. The boss didn't even refuse him and agreed. The head began to bargain and said that he would give a discount of 10 taels of gold for everything. But the owner was shocked, and upon hearing about 10 taels of gold, said that the visitor had lost his mind. But the head tried to explain to him that he didn't understand what quality was. Let him look at the material of this pillow. It's golden toad silk. The owner was categorically against it and asked him to sell it all to someone else. Hearing this, the chief offered a friendly 8 baht for everything, but the owner still refused. The chief couldn't resist and lowered the price to 5 baht. He couldn't lower the price any further. But suddenly the owner saw the painting in Chan's hands and asked to look at it. Chan did not refuse and handed it over. The owner saw that it was Zuyan paper and immediately realized that they had no money problems. So why mock their shop? The master was surprised to hear this, as this paper was very expensive. The owner looked at it and said that he was not mistaken and that it was definitely Shuyang paper, and such paper was worth more than 10 gold taels. But then he looked closer and saw the inscription left by Ping in the corner. He was shocked and asked Zhao Lu to come over because he needed to talk to him. The master looked at them with a worried look as they whispered in the corner. Lu asked the second owner if he was sure about this. The owner replied that it was definitely her. The owner apologized to the guys and said that the boss had to take a look at it. Could they give them a little time? The master and Chang noticed that their attitude had changed completely and agreed. An hour later, the owner came over and said that the old man in the shop believed that the person who brought such a rarity was clearly a professional. He asked them not to make fun of them anymore. Chan tried to say that it was not a rarity and explain where it came from, but the master grabbed both his cheeks and tried to shut his mouth. The master decided to take a different approach and speak seriously, showing the amount he wanted on his fingers. The head thought that, judging by their reaction, they had misunderstood something, and now it was a battle of courage. Getting 50 baht was quite realistic, and it was very good that he reacted quickly. The owner, hearing the price, began to think. Chang tried to explain to him that he was greedy, but the master said he didn't understand, and that it was a strategy. Suddenly, the owner spoke up and said that he had made up his mind and was offering 5,000 baht. The master was delighted to hear this. But then, after thinking about it, he was shocked at the amount he had offered them. The owner pointed to the master's amount and agreed with him on 5,000 baht. The master thought that the owner was joking with them and asked him again. The owner replied that he did not understand why the venerable Immortal was saying such things. After all, this pawn shop never jokes when it comes to business. Chang was also shocked that the painting was worth 5,000 baht, but when he saw the master's look, he thought about why he thought that. After all, he needed to agree quickly. But the master suddenly apologized and thought that there had been a misunderstanding. He meant 50,000 baht. Chan was very angry when he heard these words and thought that the master had simply gone mad. The owner asked the guest again how much he wanted. 50,000 baht? The master confirmed his words and set a condition that he would not accept a penny less. Chang wanted the master to be a little more reasonable, at least now. How could a painting cost 50,000 baht? The owner suddenly began to laugh and replied that the old owner was right, that the guest was definitely not an amateur. And it seemed that this time there would be no discount. He decided to be honest. Although 50,000 baht was an insane amount of money, for the recluse Qinglian, it was not beyond the realm of possibility. The master couldn't believe his eyes. After all, he had just blurted out that figure as a bluff to make it seem like it was the maximum, and now he himself doesn't understand how the painting could be so expensive? Something's not right here. He decided to calm himself down first. Then he would continue to follow this lead and find out more information. The master calmed down and said that the owner was right, and that he should have agreed earlier. And to be honest, they had already asked about the price in other stores. He wasn't the only one who knew about the recluse Qinglian. But the owner replied that the recluse Qinglian was no longer a secret in their circle. Although he had appeared only recently, in the state of Jin, he was already called the foremost scholar. Not only has his calligraphy been perfected, but his painting skills are even more exceptional. And today, throughout the state of Jin, countless women are crazy about his poetry. They spend sleepless nights dreaming of his appearance. Countless arrogant scholars have humbled themselves, imitating and analyzing his works. This unprecedented style even broke through the boundaries of time, causing a cultural renaissance in art. It is only unfortunate that by the time his works were discovered, the master himself had already disappeared without a trace. The world never got to see his true face. But since ancient times, scholars have valued reputation above all else. What reader does not dream of becoming famous throughout the country, of becoming a great Confucian scholar respected by all? But the recluse Qinglian treated such things as dust, leaving so freely. And how could they not feel both shame and admiration at the same time? Surely the two of them agree with this. The master thought they were talking about his foolish little disciple. The master agreed with his words and said that everything was exactly as they had heard before. The owner thought that they must have heard that this painting had a huge flaw and that it was a portrait. Compared to his best landscapes, the price was an order of magnitude different. Now Chan began to laugh and understood what was going on. He thought that his unmatched appearance would definitely add value to the painting. But the master was angry with Chang and couldn't understand how he had the audacity to laugh. Hadn't he heard that the price was an order of magnitude different? The apprentice asked his mentor not to worry. They hadn't said exactly how much they had lost yet. The owner replied that at least tens of thousands of lians were gone, and a small loss, of course. The master began to say aloud that he wanted to eat someone alive right now, but he restrained himself and asked for the final price. The owner replied that 10,000 baht was all he could give. After all, it wasn't a pure landscape, and there were no poems. The master agreed immediately, and the owner was shocked that the old man would not haggle. But the master replied that there was no need to haggle, because the owner looked trustworthy and should get the money quickly. Leaving the pawn shop, Chang said that he thought the master would go to another store. The master replied that they had taken what they could and would stop there. After all, with their strength, did the apprentice really think they could escape if someone found out? A noble man is innocent, but if he has jade with him, he is guilty. Chang began to praise his teacher for being calm and resourceful, and he hadn't even realized what was going on yet. The headmaster understood this anyway, otherwise how could he be his teacher? And he shouted that he had as much as 10,000 taels. But he got angry and asked his student, beating him, why it had to be a portrait. They lost tens of thousands because of it. But Chang replied that he didn't know that portraits were worthless. The master looked at the money and wondered who this little Ping was and how much he was hiding from them. But Chang shared that his younger brother simply had his own difficulties, and he did not think that his younger brother was a bad person. The master replied that he assumed the young apprentice seemed sincere. If that was the case, let it remain between them, hidden in their hearts. And there was no need to seek the truth here. And when he decides to speak, he will do so naturally. Enough empty talk. It's time to go. Chang was surprised and wondered where. The master replied that the younger brother had done a lot for the sect, and as his mentor, he was obliged to thank him with a worthy gift. Chan did not understand what kind of worthy gift this was. When they arrived at their destination, he saw that they were going to a pavilion of mysterious origin. But Chang decided to ask the master if he was being too generous, since it was the most expensive store in town. But the head did not understand what there was to be afraid of. His younger brother had earned this money. Since he was a genius, they had to do their best to educate him, for the sake of the future of their Qingyun sect, and there was no need to think of him as greedy, lustful, and unreliable. In critical moments, he knew what was important, and in the future, if their sect rose to the third, second, or even first level, perhaps everything would depend on him. But Chang had heard that this was a pavilion of mysterious origin. He had heard that it was terribly expensive, but the master told him to keep quiet and pretend he was rich. Upon entering the store, they were greeted by a beautiful girl who welcomed them to the mysterious origin. And venerable immortals can enter without waiting in line. The master was very surprised at how the rich lived, and now he remembered that old pawnbroker. The girl decided to ask him if they had come for magical instruments or manuals. The master pretended to be an important person and decided to find out how much the best manuals cost. The girl replied that she immediately saw that the guests wanted only the best of the best. In the store, a set of first-class manuals costs about 100,000 taels of gold, and since it was their anniversary, there was a 30% discount. When Chang heard this, he was shocked by such a huge discount. The girl thought it was just over 100,000 gold taels. After the anniversary event is over, they won't find such a low price again. Chang was shocked that she actually called more than 100,000 cheap. The moment of the rich is really not for them, the poor, to understand. The master asked his student why he was so panicked. Let him have at least a little bit of determination. But Chang believed that they didn't even have enough money for one set. But the master decided to find out how much the introductory volume alone cost. The girl was surprised and asked if the gentleman was sure. After all, buying one separately was useless. The master told her not to worry about whether it was useful or not. He just needed to know if it was possible. The lady replied that anything was possible, but he advised her to think carefully, as their store did not accept returns. The master asked again how much the introductory volume of the first-class manual cost. The girl replied that it was, of course, much cheaper. Chang asked the master not to act so proud. Spending 10,000 baht on useless introductory techniques was madness. The master reminded him how unusually quick-witted his younger brother was. Chang remembered and understood everything. He had the entire set for one random sword mark. And the master was right. The introductory volume would definitely be enough for this monster. He was so happy and satisfied that he thought it would be a huge profit. The girl came over and said that she had just asked the shopkeeper, and these 3 introductory volumes of first-class manuals could be sold separately. The master became curious as to which one possessed the greatest power. The girl thought for a moment and replied that the most powerful one would be the river flow sword technique. It is so named because, once mastered, the power of the sword flows like a mighty river, truly formidable. And if someone has exceptional talent, they can even understand the next level, the Linhai sword technique. But it is also the most expensive. Even the introductory volume alone costs 9,000 taels of gold. The master was shocked that even a fragment cost so much. He decided to invest everything and buy the most expensive one. And with the remaining money, he wants to buy high-quality pills to improve his qi and energy pills. Chang was surprised and asked the master if he was really going to spend every last coin. The master insisted that he would buy everything with all his money, but Chang understood and decided to find out if the master was under the influence of something today. The master mourned his 10,000 baht, and he handed over the money, but the girl couldn't take it from his hands and told him to let go if he was buying it. Leaving the store, Chang tried to calm the master down because he was crying all the time. The master kept saying that he was in a lot of pain. But the master suddenly asked his student if his second and third younger brothers were also taking the alchemist and rune master exams at the end of the year. Chang replied that they were. And how was the master going to return? They had no money. The master had no intention of returning and decided to show him a hidden place with treasures. Meanwhile, the salesman was shouting that they were having a sale on manuals, and the price was by weight, 10 taels of gold per caddy. The boys immediately came to him, and the salesman decided to ask if they wanted to weigh something. Chang was shocked and didn't understand if this was the hidden treasure spot he had mentioned. The master asked his apprentice not to be fooled by the price, as real treasures were hidden here. The master told the seller that 10 taels for 1 caddy was robbery, and now he was asking him for 10 caddies for 10 taels. But the seller did not agree and believed that these were real goods. But the master decided to hurry him up and find out whether he was selling or not. If not, then they would leave right away. After these words, the seller offered 5 katis. At that moment, Chang stepped aside and crouched down. He looked around and saw comics depicting the perfect development of shapeless visions. He was shocked and didn't understand what kind of nonsense this was. You can't work with this at all. After that, the master felt satisfied, and they returned with their hands full. But Chan decided to ask him if the master would buy something for himself, but the master didn't understand what to buy. After all, he was just a skinny old man. The main thing was that his student and the sect were doing well. That was all the happiness he needed as a mentor. But Chang thought the mentor was being very unpleasant today. The master immediately told him to get out of there. He gave him 7 days to quickly master the basics of the river flow sword technique. Otherwise, it would be a year without any pretense. Chang suggested that he needed to train. The master hit him on the head and replied that he was right. Why give the scroll directly to his younger brother? How could they maintain their reputation as masters? Let him quickly practice the basics. It's just an introductory volume, enough wit. Then he can pretend to be an experienced master teaching him. And for now, he needs to use the scrolls bought at the market to cover himself, forcing him to read them first. Chang believed that with his incredible understanding, he might even be able to handle these purchased scrolls. The master suddenly started laughing at him and saying that Chang was serious about these things. And he seriously thought that the 4 seasons technique was from the counter, but he explained that the scrolls at the market take techniques from real techniques, but are essentially complete nonsense. They cannot be called real, neither in essence nor in method. It's like the difference between fiction and real history. Let him look at these books, if even one of them resembles cultivation techniques, and they would only fool a complete novice like Ping. Chang decided to find out. Then why did he say he would give them to his second and third younger brothers to practice? The master replied that this was also a joke. In fact, he planned to put them in the Sutra Pavilion as decoration. He was coming up with another plan for the second and third brothers. He started laughing, and the very thought was funny. Mastering market scrolls was a fantasy. If anyone could understand anything from this rubbish, he would eat all these books like a master. But Chang suggested deceiving his younger brother with another painting. Then the techniques of the second and third brothers would also be resolved. The master replied that he had thought about it too, but they had already deceived him once for the sake of the sect. If they continued, he was afraid that they would forget their original goal and see Pin as nothing more than a money tree. On the other hand, Ping could paint just one painting, and it would outweigh centuries of their sect's work. And for the sect to grow, everything requires money. What a difficult choice he faces. That's why he hates these moral dilemmas, and now he'll give himself time to think before deciding. In the meantime, he must seriously teach him sword skills for the next 2 months. He plans to send him to the Qingzhou Sword Conference. Chang was shocked and asked the master if he was serious. He asked his mentor not to take any risks. His younger brother may be quick to understand sword techniques, but he lacks inner strength. Strong on the outside, empty on the inside. And this is the Qingzhou Sword Dao Conference, where people can be killed in real combat. He himself had participated in the Qingzhou Sword Dao Conference twice. All the best talents in Qingzhou gather there. He was only a participant, but with incredible luck, he passed all the free fights and made it into the top 500. And Ping is now like a child who has mastered the most complex fighting techniques. If he goes, it's suicide. And the master asked him not to tell the other younger brothers about it. Just let him say that he returned the money that was taken from them. Nothing more. Meanwhile, at the top of the mountain, Ping trained non-stop and studied various sword attack techniques. Chan was surprised when he saw this, because he had only been gone for a minute, and he had already mastered the sword movements. It was so frustrating and envious. Chang suddenly decided to ask him if fencing had become boring. Pin said that he was improving every day, and that it was never boring here. Chan was shocked to hear this and didn't understand. Was this even human? But Ping became curious as to why his older brother was asking. Chang replied that he just thought that if he was bored, he could give him another scroll to practice with. Pin jumped up with joy and shouted to his older brother that he was very bored here. He thought that if his older brother's single sword movement had given him an understanding of sword technique, then if he gave him a scroll on cultivation, wouldn't he soar to the heavens? Chang handed him the book and gave it to his younger disciple. He told him that this scroll was called The Art of the Ancient Demon God. When Ping saw the book, he was surprised that it was the art of the ancient demon god. If it wasn't an outstanding cultivation method, how dare he call himself a demon god? And if it wasn't an immortal hidden sect, then what was it? He couldn't understand. Chang told his brother that he had once accidentally found this scroll on physical cultivation in ancient ruins, and no one knew where it came from. But as cultivators, one cannot train only with a sword. Both physical and spiritual practice are important. He missed the best moment for spiritual cultivation, and his spiritual root is weak. It might even be better to start with physical cultivation first. With a powerful body and his understanding of the sword, he will be in no way inferior to a spiritual cultivator. Chang realized in an instant that he was talking nonsense. He didn't even believe himself. And Chang said that, if there was nothing else, he'd better leave and try to master it himself. In his mind, he wanted to leave quickly. If he continued to talk about this market trash, everything would be revealed. And as soon as he mastered even a little of the river flow sword technique, he would be able to return and put on another show. He couldn't wait for that. That night, Ping began to study the ancient demon god's technique, and everything worked out perfectly for him. He understood that even the name itself sounded cool and daring. Compared to it, the technique of the Four Thunders was nothing, and right now, he wanted to practice. But studying required complete concentration, and he couldn't be distracted. And especially now, he needed to restrain himself. First, he would strengthen the momentum of the Four Thunders, then everything else. Meanwhile, at the Changyu residence, Chang was also trying to learn this technique of the demon god. He didn't understand what to do next. After all, he didn't understand anything. And it was said that you needed a little bit of wit. After spending half a day, Ping managed to master the power of the Four Thunders sword. Now all that remained was for him to understand the meaning of the Four Thunders sword. Ping understood that his older brother had never directly said how difficult it was to comprehend the true meaning of the sword. He felt it himself. After all, the intention of the sword is the very will of the technique, and one cannot approach it hastily. It is far more dangerous to misunderstand than to fail to comprehend at all. It was no coincidence that his older brother had passed this guidance on to him at this particular moment, and not earlier or later. He clearly foresaw that he might give in to impatience and stray from the right path. That's how his older brother is, always seeing further than others. Ping decided to open the book and take a look. He immediately came across the section on the art of tempering the body of a god demon. And he, like the venerable Taoist Ma Xuan, born before the creation of heaven and earth, endured 360 million tribulations. And he attained unity with the Tao, and became one with the cosmos itself. He discovered this method of tempering by accident, thanks to his understanding of heaven and earth. And under the heavens, everyone values only spiritual development, unaware of the true power of tempering the body, considering the raising of a mountain to be its summit. But true hardening of the body allows one to grasp the sun and moon, pluck the stars, step over the heavens with one's flesh, and destroy all that exists with a single blow. The highest realm of physical perfection, as he believes, should imitate the gods and demons, the divine organs, and the body of a demon. Only by possessing the divine entrails and divine blood of the gods, as well as the true body of a demon, can a person become the body of a god demon. Pin was shocked to learn that the divine organs and the body of a demon could destroy all existence with a single blow. In a word, it's awesome. But cultivating this method means enduring unimaginably cruel trials, and this cannot be learned by ordinary people. Only those with great will, great patience, and great wisdom can master it. And he doesn't know if he dares to take on this challenge. Pin didn't understand what this nonsense was. What kind of improvement is there without deprivation? The title of Bookworm King, which he earned even before moving to this world, was not for nothing, and now he wanted to see what was written in the main part. But he remembered Chan's words that the book contained an image of a demon god, a diagram of body tempering that the great Taoist had discovered through his understanding of heaven and earth. It needed to be studied carefully. Pin actually understood the logic, but the posture confused him. He didn't understand how one could practice in such a position. Ping began to try the movements and believed that his older brother would not lie to him, and he should concentrate and not think too much. Meanwhile, in the state of Jin, in the ink scroll pavilion, the master asked the fairy Mo if everything was ready. After all, it was almost yin hour, and if the draft wasn't submitted, they would really be in trouble. Fairy Mo replied that she knew everything and was already in a hurry, and he should stop nagging her. The gentleman said that this ancient book on the art of tempering the body of a demon god was not selling at all. In the end, less than 3 copies were sold, and he asks her to stop writing such manuals. It's too exaggerated, no one believes it. In their time, cultivators like something simpler and easier to understand, and she should take a look at the bestseller on how to make one spirit stone work 10 times more effectively. It's selling like hotcakes. Mo thought it was terribly boring, and if it's so annoying to repeat, then let him write it himself. That's exactly what she likes. But suddenly she remembered and decided to find out about what she had asked him to find. The gentleman replied that he had found out. The Academy of 10 Nations would begin officially enrolling students next year. Mo was delighted and thought it was wonderful. Finally, she would be able to enroll in the academy, and surely many people would gather at the first academy. 3 days later, Ping was so exhausted he couldn't move and was spitting up fluid that was coming out of his body. He had already coughed up blood 3 times, but he was still far from understanding. The manual clearly stated that gifted individuals were able to comprehend the heavenly diagram of the god demon at a glance. Was his comprehension really so insignificant? The harder the path, the stronger his determination. But from this day on, 11 hours of practice a day and 1 hour of rest would be enough. And if his gift was not enough, then he had to work many times harder than others. Pin decided that he would not back down until he mastered this technique. He continued to think and was ready to sit and solve this problem without stopping. After all, it was not for nothing that the Great Tao was said to be simple. And that means if you reduce the diagram of the sky gazer to its very essence, but he realized that this was only the surface. But he did not know what the true core was, and he remembered reading about 3 eyes and 6 gazes. The heavenly eye means a kind of extrasensory vision, capable of seeing beyond the visible, that which is inaccessible to mortals. And the eye of Dharma, if he remembers correctly, is a higher level of insight, allowing one to comprehend the essence and laws of things. And he must strive for higher levels, for the perception of the essence and laws of all that exists. But he realized the essence and laws behind this technique, and he began to understand a little. Pin understood that when ordinary people look at the sky, they see only the endless expanse above them. But they do not realize what they call heaven in reality. In that moment, he understood that it was the innate heart. Both Buddhas and demons look at all beings differently, because each being has a unique heart. But the textbook says that inside every being there is a god or demon that belongs only to them. One only needs to look sincerely within oneself and find it. Now he realized that he had been very foolish. He almost missed his sudden enlightenment, and there is absolutely no need to look at the sky. The so-called contemplation of the heavens actually means turning your heart into eyes and seeing the world within your own soul. In the deepest corners of his soul hides his own god or demon. Suddenly, he began to feel a light breeze, and his eyes opened wide. But he decided to stop and did not understand who was in front of him, his god or demon. At that moment, all the influential warriors gathered on the back mountain in the ruins of the Academy of 10 Nations. The demon thought it was a heavenly phenomenon and wondered if a divine being was descending. Heaven would not abandon their righteous path. But the warrior reminded him that he had told him to control himself. With such behavior, he was not at all like a disciple of the righteous path, but rather like a demon. And why be so worried? Heavenly phenomena are never absolutely accurate. The demon tried to convey this to his older brother, but the warrior understood everything and suggested waiting a little longer. If it was really gold, it couldn't stay hidden. But in the great imperial palace of Xia, a girl told His Majesty that the stars were falling, and that it was a heavenly sign of his reign. What if a divine being really did descend into the world, but not within the borders of the great Xiao Empire? What would he do then? The head of Xia replied that he would simply take possession of it. The whole world belongs to the great Xia, let alone some divine being. But the icy plain of demonic beasts was in turmoil. The demon leader sensed that a divine being was descending, and it seemed that they, the demons, would have to redouble their efforts and rise up against the other beings and warriors. Meanwhile, at the residence of Chang Yu Chang, he was struggling with reading the book and was already sick of looking at it. And he still didn't understand a damn thing. But he was already used to the fact that he couldn't cultivate himself. But the real trouble was with the teacher. He remembered that the master had asked for 10,000 taels to be returned to them with his sword, and that was 10,000 taels. Chang understood that this greedy old man would never spare him, and he himself did not understand what had been happening to him lately. As soon as midnight strikes, he is overcome with oppressive melancholy. Could this be the very syndrome of midnight depression? What is the point of living? His younger sister watched everything and wondered what had been happening to her older brother lately. At this hour, He always gazes at the stars alone. Could something be troubling him? And what does his second older brother think about this? The second older brother, Shu Luocheng, believed that the problem was that the new younger brother's talent was too weak. But as the older brother, the sect member showed no patience at all. Tomorrow he would teach this younger brother a lesson himself, and at the same time, the older brother, so that he would understand what it means to be a true mentor. Chang struggled for a long time, and suddenly realized that this was the very power he had been trying to achieve. This was his own technique of physical cultivation. But Ping closed his eyes and concentrated for only a brief moment. However, in his mind, it felt as if hours had passed. And in his heart rose a demon god whose body seemed to be forged from heavenly steel, eternal and indestructible, holding the law of the universe in his hands and standing opposite the entire cosmos. His entire being exuded an aura that was impossible to comprehend with the eye, terrifying beyond comparison. And when those all-seeing eyes turned to Pin, an unstoppable flood of information about perfection rushed over him, like a raging river flowing into the ocean, pouring into his mind. In the real world, Pin understood that the so-called art of tempering the body of a god demon consisted of taking the sky as a hammer, the earth as a forge, absorbing all existing things and reforging the body anew. It is divided into 5 stages: minor demon god, great demon god, supreme demon god, Tao demon god, and Tao progenitor god. And now the method that remains in Pin's mind is the chapter on the minor god demon. And by using the sky as a hammer and the earth as a furnace, tempering the flesh 81 times, one can solidify the body of a minor god demon. At that moment, the power of the flesh will become like a true dragon. The blood and qi will rage like a blazing sun, and the essence, qi, and spirit will reach their limit. But the key to practicing the art of tempering the body of a god demon lies in the heavenly hammer and the earthly furnace, using the sky as a hammer and the earth as a furnace to temper the body again and again. And through spiritual energy, a connection is established with heaven and earth, borrowing the power of the earth to form the supreme furnace. Then the heavenly power is applied as a divine hammer. It strikes the body, tempering it until the body of the god demon is forged. This process is extremely dangerous. The body collapses and rebuilds itself again and again, requiring superhuman willpower. And the stronger the cultivation method, the more it tests one's endurance. He understands this completely. But in order to form the heavenly hammer and earthly forge, he needs a huge amount of spiritual energy to connect with heaven and earth. But he doesn't know what to do. Ping understood that there was no spiritual energy in his body at all. But he had heard that pills in the world of cultivation could give a certain amount of spiritual power. However, every medicine contains a certain amount of poison, and since he had not even entered the stage of qi purification, he did not know if it was safe, so he could not act rashly. His teacher told him that his second eldest brother specialized in making pills. He wondered if he could ask him to teach him. Meanwhile, at the second eldest brother's residence, Su trained and created a fireball with his cultivation. He understood that another pill had been formed, but he had to remain calm, not rejoice in success, and not grieve over losses. And tomorrow, he would show his older brother what it meant to be a true teacher and role model. Meanwhile, at the residence of his older brother, Chang was angry and saw that he did not understand anything, and he decided to give up. He would no longer think about it. If he worked hard, failure would not be able to catch up with him. But even if he didn't understand, in the end, they would all become just a mound of earth. It was all meaningless. All these efforts, all this talk of success, it was all meaningless. But the master himself climbed the mountain and decided to find out how his senior student was doing. And had he already mastered the 9,000th art of the sword, like the flow of a river? But Chang did not know what difference it made whether he understood or not. Only by letting go of attachments can one find joy. But the master was shocked and did not understand what this dazzling Buddhist light was. What had he been cultivating at all? Chang replied that he was reporting to his teacher and had not cultivated anything at all. But this disciple no longer cared about anything. The master believed that he actually knew that everything would end this way, and it was time to go to the mountains of the silent forest. Chan was shocked to hear this and did not understand why, But the master replied that a real test on the brink of life and death could help him break through, and it would be beneficial for his growth. The master decided that he would go with him too. But Chang was indignant, because he understood that the mountains of the silent forest were the most dangerous area within Qingzhou. Due to the high concentration of spiritual energy there, countless powerful demonic beasts dwelled there. Even if he was a disciple of the strongest sect in Qingzhou, dying there was a common occurrence. But the master believed that while he was training him, he could also hunt low-level demonic beasts and earn some technique points for his younger comrades. Chang began to run away and shout that he would not go to the mountains of the silent forest. His life was more important than anything else, but the master asked him to be quiet. And hadn't he just said that he didn't care about anything anymore? Meanwhile, all 4 sects of Thunder Swords gathered in one place. The leader said that 7 disciples were participating in this tournament, and that they had achieved great perfection in mastering the Spring Thunder Sword, and even 2 who had brought it to perfection, and they were truly worthy of being considered the best talents of Qingzhou. However, the upcoming Qingzhou Sword Dao Conference was no simple event. There were still 2 months to go before it, so there was no room for complacency. And in order to win a place in the top 10, the sect master himself will personally instruct him in cultivation. The disciples were shocked that the sect master himself would personally teach them, and it must be serious. Some of them had been in the sect all this time and had never seen the sect master. The leader said that the reason was still unknown, and that he should just do everything possible to get into the top 10. In addition, they had confirmed information that the hidden sect in Qingzhou had also sent disciples to participate in the Qingzhou Sword Dao Conference. Upon hearing about the hidden sect, the warriors understood that this would complicate matters. And above Qingzhou is Jin, and above Jin are the 10 nations. It is said that, once upon a time, the 10 nations underwent a great upheaval. Some huge sects perished, and some of their most valuable forces disappeared into remote places. Some hidden sects pass on their legacy through a single line, keeping their highest secrets, and these sects cannot even be compared to the 4 Thunder Swords sect. But all the influential masters gathered on one day in the 4 Thunder Swords sect in the Great Hall. They all showed their respect for the sect's master. But the master asked them to be informal. Today, he had gathered them all for an important matter. The master said that he had gathered them all today for an important matter. The leaders of the countries asked the sect master if they could ask what exactly had happened. Could it be related to the Taishuan Sword Tower token? The master replied that it was not, and if it were only about the Taishuan Sword Tower token, it would not be so serious. Did they know about the 10 Nations Academy? The lady did not understand what Academy of 10 Nations he was talking about. Was that legendary academy going to recruit students again? The master replied that the 10 Nations Academy was the most elite academy of the immortal path on the entire continent. Even the lowest-level students became the pinnacle of the entire continent. But the recruitment of new students there was extremely strict and mysterious. Sometimes they would not accept anyone for 10 years. It is the dream of every cultivator, but almost no one can achieve it. The lady understood that the sect leader meant that the imperial court of the Jin state would once again poison people at the Sword Path Conference. The head replied that everything was correct. As before, the imperial court would secretly send special emissaries to select good seeds and recommend them to the Academy of 10 Nations. And he already knew who it would be. On the Jianyu continent, the status of the imperial court was slightly higher than that of the immortal sects, and if it were the main immortal sect of the Jin state, then even the imperial court would show respect. But for a sect like theirs, even though they are the first sect of Qingzhou and have a certain amount of influence, they still cannot surpass the imperial court. The head showed everyone the painting and told them to look at it. Everyone was surprised and did not understand what it meant. And was the man in this painting really a messenger? The leader replied that this hermit, Qing Lian, had disappeared without a trace 6 months ago. Could they think of where he might have gone? The warriors thought about it and wondered if he had joined some small sect to cultivate immortality. The master replied that as far as he knew, there was an unrivaled swordsman at the court of the Jin state who had once been a genius at the Academy of the 10 Nations. But for reasons unknown, he was expelled from the academy and later became the inspector general and commander of the Jin state. The world only knows about the sword master Tai Xuan, But few know that this Inspector General also entered the realm of sword intent. And since a new painting by the recluse Qing Lian has appeared here, it is very likely that this man is in the state of Jin. There are also rumors that this Inspector General is not only an unrivaled swordsman, but also exceptionally handsome. A man of such stature in Jin, how could they not know about him? The warrior replied to the sect master that this was only his suggestion. Did he have any evidence? The leader began to laugh and understood everything with a single word. In an instant, he threw the painting into the sky and infused it with his magic. After that, he decided to find out if they still thought he was wrong. But there is sword intent in the painting. There are only two possibilities. Either the artist himself touched the realm of sword intent, but there is only one possibility left. The person in the painting managed to condense the highest sword intent and imprint it on the scroll. People began to shout that their sect master was truly clairvoyant. As expected of him, he was able to deduce so much from a few details. The master replied that this was remarkable. There is another reason. This general inspector is known for despising wealth and women, loving only to wander through the mountains and rivers, learning about the world. And sometimes, he even casually exchanges state treasures, bestowed by the king himself, for money, which is then thoughtlessly spent. He happened to find this painting in the ancient city of White Fruit, and according to the shopkeeper, the person who sold it looks strikingly similar to the man depicted here. The warrior believed that, in fact, some masters roamed the wilds, took out their flying swords, and gave them to random peasants in exchange for fruit. And did the sect master want them to show him respect? The leader replied that they should not deliberately flatter him. Moreover, they should even hide this news. For a man of such high standing, he has seen it all. Such petty tricks will only earn his contempt, and if they really meet him and can respectfully ask for advice, maybe that will win his favor. He considers himself unsurpassed in wisdom. If it weren't for him, where would this sect be? But on the other side, night had fallen, and Ping was sitting in the bitter cold. But he understood that it was not yet possible to practice the ancient art of tempering the body of a god-demon. It was too risky. As for whether he could use pills to stimulate spiritual energy, it would be better to ask his older brother. At that moment, the second elder brother suddenly approached him and addressed the younger brother. He introduced himself and said he was his second older brother, and he could just call him older brother Luochen. Ping was shocked that the second older brother himself had come to see him. He immediately greeted him and showed his respect. Su said that his older brother had been busy with business lately, so he had come himself to teach him the art of alchemy. Ping wondered if the second eldest brother thought his talent was too weak. But Su believed that his older brother was essentially a good person. But this was the first time he had passed on the Tao, so there was no need to take his actions too much to heart. On the path to immortality, each realm has its own master. Just because his talent in sword practice is not great does not mean that his other abilities are not valuable. Ping told his older brother that he was not discouraged. He would simply work harder at sword practice, so that his older brother would recognize him. Upon hearing these words, Su raised his hands to the sky, opened the window in front of his younger brother, and took out a huge samovar. He ordered them to end their conversation and begin alchemy. Ping did not refuse and immediately agreed. Su said that the great Tao has 3,000 paths, and none is higher or lower than another. However, it is in the Tao of alchemy that the great secrets of heaven and earth are hidden. And what does Brother Yi think, who is the most powerful alchemist? But Ping did not understand what that meant. He had heard something similar somewhere before. Zhu was curious to know what the young man considered to be the ultimate goal of the way of the sword. And Ping decided that the second brother also possessed great power. Ping said that he thought the most powerful alchemist stood above all things, and with a single pill he could make the strongest in the world lose their minds. And any genius, no matter how invincible he may seem, will sooner or later exhaust himself. But an alchemist is capable of breaking the laws of heaven and rewriting destiny. And just one life-prolonging pill can grant the strongest cultivator under the heavens another 100 or even 1,000 years.